We know from research that 95% of customers prefer companies that provide them data throughout the sales process. And it's quite incredible. So if we manage or if we master to also convince the logic part of our body that this product is meaningful or has good impact. Data can be emotional if you add the stories to it and if you are doing good visuals to it. If we are playing on these high stakes, we really want to work with personality structures and true emotions. You have to make the stakes very high. When I visualize it, you have one focal point in the visual where the customer immediately looks at. Either you highlight the color and the rest is in gray shades or whatever, but you have to have the strongest visual in the high stakes area.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we'll talk about the power of data visualization in marketing and sales with the awesome Lisa Wierer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joseph. I'm glad to be here. Awesome.
You have a very interesting background. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about where you come from, what you're actually working on at the moment, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of data visualization and the whole aspect of psychology and marketing and sales.
Amazing. Yeah. So originally, I'm an academic. I'm coming from an academic background. I'm a professor in methods and methodology, where I research a lot on large language models and network analysis and all of that stuff, and also data visualization. But since some years, I started to work with companies, which really excite me because they are just ready to realize something. And as everybody knows, probably academia is pretty slow. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, I work with companies and I help them develop and communicate their brand identity. And on the way there, that happens a lot. And this is also why I'm here today. Because, first of all, we get to the depths of the company and really look at, with the help of LLMs, what the notions are of the company, what the traits are, etc. And then towards the end of the process, we develop a data story that is helping them to sell their product and get loyal customers and be a bit different than the others are out there. So that's the thing I'm doing it right now.
Really interesting. Yeah. I'm wondering, data visualization in the first place, why is it so important to tell a story with data? I mean, we all know there's this funny meme I saw a couple of times where usually you have a data mess, but with kind of Lego blocks that are laying around on the floor. But then if you want to tell a story with that Lego blocks, you can then build a house, a garden, whatever. So how do you see where do you see the importance of data visualization in marketing and sales? How does it benefit people, especially companies?
I think there is a huge benefit. So if we want to, I think there are three aspects to it, actually. Because the first one is what you're saying is you're having a bunch of data and you bring out the message or the core pattern or the key stuff that is in this data and transport it so that people can understand it. So that's the Lego part of it. But I think it's so much more powerful than that because we know from research that 95% of customers prefer companies that provide them data throughout the sales process. And it's quite incredible. So if we manage or if we master to also convince the logic part of our body that this product is meaningful or has good impact or good value for us, then we are much more likely to buy. So this is the data part of it, but you can, maybe we talk more about it, but you can put data out there in a pretty boring way, so in the old school bar chart way, or you can make it a bit different, what is now trending, I would say. So that's then other part of data storytelling that is really valuable to it.
Yeah, give us kind of the quote unquote secret sauce, which is there's the old way, kind of the old approach, the old school approach versus the new approach. And I think the mindset of people or just the population in general has shifted, right? Everybody's becoming more skeptical and everybody's overwhelmed by a lot of information coming from social media, so that the buying process has become much more complicated. So how can we, with data visualization, with Lisa on my side, how can we make this more exciting for the buyer, potential buyer?
Yeah, as you're saying, that's the key, right? There's so much out there, and the customer has to choose what is right for them. And so maybe I can extend a bit and talk a bit about our brain. So how our brain processes information, how we come to the thing that we all want to have as entrepreneurs or as founders or whatever position we have. We all want to have action by the customer. So either click, engage, buy, right? So that's the end result that we all strive for. But until we are there, there must happen quite a lot of stuff in our brain. So the first thing that we must master is we need to get access. So that is, I would say, still, 90s, 2000s of marketing. We need to create a lot of intention. So we need to make something extreme, outstanding. So that's still the case, right? We need to make something extreme so that people stop scrolling and look at your product or whatever you have. And that means that we get access to the brain. So the gatekeeper of the brain, the frontal cortex, is passed. And now comes the next key step, which also quite a lot of agencies, marketer master, I would say. So that's creating emotions. We all know that we buy emotionally. And so there we must have a strong story or something that is touching the person's heart, I would say. And storytelling in general is pretty strong there, because there you can get the people engaged in the story and think with it. And once you mastered it, that the person starts thinking about what happens next, or why are the stakes so high, and why do we need to resolve this? And then you're in the amygdala, so in the main part of the brain of the customer, which is already amazing. There is something happening, and then they're close to buying. But then, and that's the part where data story comes in, then the frontal cortex kicks in again, the logic, the mind, and says, stop, is this really something reasonable? Does it make sense? I mean, that's the buyer that maybe buys the day after, or thinks quite long term about your project or your product. So there is an evaluation. And if you can convince then the customer, providing some text and data, so that's all that the frontal cortex wants for us, then you have the customer. Then the person wants to buy. And so that's how I stack the whole process together. You have questions, sorry?
Makes a lot, sort of interrupting. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just wondering, the decision-making process, is it like kind of binary, where it's like, okay, if I provide them data, then they're going to make the decision, or is there maybe something else? Because if we talk about retargeting, for example, you keep feeding them ads, maybe not necessarily with data, but you keep pushing it or hammer it into their brains. Are you using specific techniques, software tools, or tactics, apart from all the KPIs and number crunching, to make sure a potential buyer is going to be much more likely to be convinced to buy the product or service?
Yeah. So just in a more meta level, I'm using data stories not only in the last case of the buying process, but really throughout. So make the customer journey being proven with data. That's one thing that is really important, because that the customer gets contacted the first time with the product. So then there is a problem awareness, or that he really needs this. And then we have to move on. And the next step is then that what can I get out of this product specifically? And then in the third step, you need to be different from the competitors. So then you need to be very specific that, I can bring you the value, but I can bring you the value better than others can do. So there is this part. So you have to put it in very sneakable parts throughout the process. But what we haven't talked about with the process, like the emotion part, because people might think listening to the podcast, I don't know, she's talking about data stuff, and what do emotions have to do with that whole process? Because that's really key, and we know that in all marketing and sales that's so important, that we can trigger emotions. And data can be emotional if you add the stories to it, and if you are doing good visuals to it. Like, it really depends which type of visuals you provide. But we know that, or there's a linear experience. So you have data visualization, the classic one, where you just translate the pattern of the data to a visual. And then you have, on the other end, you have data art, and then you have generative art. So that's something else where we add information that is not there. But I want to talk about data art and data visualization. And data art all the target or the goal of data art is to transport emotions. There, it's not so much about making clear, like, this is our linear way, this is how we evolve as a company, whatever. But it's to trigger emotions. And my approach is somewhere in between. So I have this emotional part in it, but I want to bring forward a specific information that is understandable. So you don't need to read the text first in order to understand what the visual has to say, which is sometimes the case for data art. I love looking at it, that is my hobby. But the work I do for companies is somewhere in between. So it's a little bit of this RD stuff from the data art area, and then you have the structured part that is really has a specific goal, leads to a specific action, and so that's, I think, a good way to be different in terms of data communication. Some years ago, in the I think 2010, I read a study where they said, "Oh, you just need to provide an infographic, and everybody will stop scrolling and look at it." This stats is quite old. I mean, nowadays more and more people provide infographics. It's still powerful, but infographics have to be good. Like, if they are, just of the sake of an infographic, people will not buy your product. You need to be a bit different.
Yeah. How do you approach it actually? Let's say someone sells a product or service. How do you kind of do the anamnesis like a doctor in the beginning? Like, how do you onboard a client, or what questions do you ask a client in order to understand what story fits them the best?
And it's an amazingly good question, and it's exactly what my passion is. Because I dig really deep, and that's why I also developed a tool with my LLMs that allows me to detect the company's personality structure. So by the end of this process, the first step of onboarding, I have a personality structure of the company. So I'm also I know a lot about personality structures from other areas of my life, and then I transport all of that information, that knowledge that I have there, in order to put the personality structure, or to detect the personality structure of a company. And it's not only fun for me, because you can really feel the company, but it helps so much along the process, because then we have a data story that is really meeting their emotions. So we work with a specific emotion that is really fitting them, and not, standard emotion that you all want to trigger or whatever. Or it's not necessarily an emotion. I can talk about a tech company that I recently had, where they communicated a lot about their nerdiness, and that they are so amazingly technical, and that's why they are so different. I think it's really cool, and it attracts us because we are nerds here probably. But then I looked a bit closer into the personality structure of the company, and we found two things. The first thing was that they were hyper enthusiastic about the product and what service they provide. So this enthusiasm was so strong, the fire was so strong, but it didn't get to the end of the process, so the customer didn't feel it. And the second thing was focus. So they were really working on details, nitty-gritty, but focused on one specific thing. And then the whole data story was on that. So focused and enthusiasm, and with these things, it was more authentic to the company itself. So.
But let me get this straight. So basically, you work out the personality profile or structure of the company first. But how do you then translate it into a graphic that attracts their customers? Because potentially you might figure out a personality profile that doesn't even match the potential buyers of that company. So how do you make sure there's a match between those?
Yeah, that's very important. So there's the personality structure analysis, and there's the dream client analysis. So I look at texts that the dream client has produced. So should it be on social media, or wherever we can find these people that are similar to that dream client. So I do a lot of a connection of texts and stuff that reflect them, and then do the same analysis with the clients. And then we sit down and evaluate whether that's the dream client, whether that's true. Because mainly they thought that then this is the dream client, but we need to re-evaluate. Or sometimes they say, okay, it's the dream client, but then we need to meet the two worlds. But often the dream client comes from inside, and that means that the dream client also speaks about these things. So what I see often is that these things are pretty overlapping. Because the dream client, they are waking up, they tell me, okay, that's the persona, that's the avatar that we constructed. Of course, they might have done already some, studies or whatever they did. But they came up with an idea what their dream client is, developing their product. And then we look at the dream client and then see whether that's a match. And of course, the data stories, then the ear listening to the data story is, of course, targeted to the client.
Got it. Okay. That's very interesting, Lisa, because usually what I encounter most of the time, or when I work with startups, it's most of the time they have a specific picture in mind of how the dream client looks like. We talk about personas, then they have 3, 4, 5 personas they talk about, but sometimes this is just a very abstract way of how the actual persona looks like. So they make an assumption, but sometimes the assumption is not correct. So they have to tweak or adopt the personas every quarter, or like just the positioning and messaging needs to be tweaked here and there. But it's interesting that you at least have most of the time an overlap of like external potential buyer versus the company persona profile, which is interesting.
And I think only once you get to the core of the company, not before, like the first meetings, we don't have an overlap, because there we have all the things that they accumulated along the way with their marketing style and what they have put on it. And then it's not who they started off as, like their vision and stuff. But the dream client was always inside. So it's like digging up this initial personality structure that was there, and that is what I see is matching often. It's hardly ever the thing that they publish at this moment. Yeah. Because there they got some influence. So influence is great because, experts are always helpful, but we need to be clear what you truly are.
Okay, yeah, definitely, 100% agree. So basically, you help them kind of uncover their true personality. This is what it is at the end of the day, which is cool. Okay, so we have the personality of the company, then the potential buyer. Now the question is, how do you translate this knowledge into a graphic that also is kind of a pattern interrupt at the same time? Because I imagine, let's say everybody on earth would work with Lisa. How can you still stand out if you work with LLMs, so large language models, and the power of AI, and with your company? If everybody would use the same service, how can you still stand out if everybody would use the same thing, Yeah. This is kind of my question.
Yeah. I think there, first of all, I've worked on data visualization for quite a long time, for 15 years or so. And I didn't realize it, but I won a lot of awards and stuff because my data visualizations were good. I never knew that. Just reflecting afterwards, where am I good in? Then I found out, okay, I do something different. And I really like, my hobby is data art indeed. So that helps me to get some of that stuff into play. But I had the system that I developed, which is a bit too complex for the podcast now to really map it out completely. But with my personality structure, I also have the visuals on top of it. So let's say detailed, they're focused, then I want to have something that is, I don't know whether you have seen the new Perplexity ad, which has this going really to the depth. So that's something that is detailed, depth, So that's representing depth, that creates that feeling. And this element I want to translate then in terms of visual. But you have different things. You have the data context that you want to add, and I adopt the data context to the personality structure. Then you have the data story, and there's a whole science about storytelling in data that we can also heavily talk about. And then the third thing is the visual part. And the visual part has to be really different. Like, I'm not doing classic bar charts at all. And still, I'm also a fan of presenting visuals that are interpretable. Like, I love watching data art, but there you see data art and you don't know what's it about. Maybe you feel like, oh, that's beautiful or whatever, but you don't know what the essence is. So I like to combine realistic elements or this extreme depth or whatever you have to a classic data visualization approach. Yeah, I don't know whether you can imagine what it is, I can make
I think it would be super helpful if you have a link or some references. We can put them in the
provide one and then you
description.
can-
I can put them in the description so people can actually check it out. It would be interesting for me. I think one of the things I first thought about when you talked about data visualization is probably paid ads. Because for paid ads, if you can transfer with the copy plus the visual, so the whole creative, a concept in a couple of milliseconds, and the people actually get it, I think your conversion rates will ultimately be higher as well.
They are immediately, it causes distrust because there is more than the poor, we are so great by us thing. I mean, there are amazing ads out there, don't get me wrong, I love watching them, but still there is this curiosity. I call it interesting curiosity because you are different and you also bring out this maybe it's my academic vibe that I bring with it. We always want to prove everything. But that's also helpful in marketing. Like if you can show that is what you have. So the classic situation is our companies I work a lot with, maybe because I'm also a circular economist, is companies from this area, so circular economy or sustainability companies, whatnot. And they have really cool products, and but the people can't buy it because the founder in himself or herself always talks about the amazing environmental impact. But in the end, customers don't care so much intrinsically about it. So it's often about mapping out and creating impact studies that really show the value to the customer. So this is what I gained, that's my financial gains throughout this period, So that's not high yield, but in the end, it's super impactful if you then can communicate it right.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the two things, which is the data storytelling aspect, but also maybe some things that you've seen in the past of companies that don't do the marketing right, whatever right and wrong means in this case. But what do you think, maybe let's start with this. What do you think companies don't do right nowadays? Because they try to stand out, but maybe there's so much more to understand. The data aspect of it, the topic of copywriting, the visual aspect of it, especially if you do paid ads. So what is it that companies do wrong, and what are some of the takeaways that we can give them, or you can give them in this podcast to maybe improve on these aspects?
What is interesting, I've seen quite a lot of companies using data. Nearly all of them have at least one data point on their homepage showing, we have interacted with X clients, we have done that amount of projects, but nobody grasps the impact for them. There is a gap in the translation to the final client. It's cool for them, it's impressive, I know it gives some credibility, but the client has to understand what is that meaning for me. So there is the context missing and the impact missing. So it's a lot about impact communication, I would say. And you have numbers, but I think people think that numbers itself already enough. They give you enough credibility, but they don't. Like if they are not communicated strongly and with a story that people don't understand. We expect, us often as entrepreneurs, we expect that people are data, they understand data and they are literate in data, but they are not. And especially they are not because they don't have your context of the company. Maybe you looking at other companies' data, you also think, so why did they put this data on there? And then a level up, I saw that companies use data, but they use context with the data, which is already amazing. But then they will use really weird context, like context that nobody can touch, that's meaningful for the specific client. So there it's also important to have the client portfolio exactly ahead. But that's only the data side of it. So I see that more and more data points pop up, but there's much more potential to make it a strong story and to really benefit from the credibility of the data and not only put it there because that's not enough. And you have to put the right data. That's another case that I just popped up in my head. I had a company that uses a lot of data on their homepage because they are a company working with data or their service is about data. So that's impressive. You see a lot of data, of course, because they're a data company. But they put it everywhere the same numbers on every subtag, like it has to be targeted. I know it's a lot of work to really go through these things and prepare it correctly, but it has a lot of impact because that's your credibility. And if you put the wrong numbers or numbers that people don't understand, it has the opposite effect again. Because then people are like, I don't, it's so far ahead or so far away, this company, I don't feel attached to it, or it is some hierarchical structure then that people don't resonate with. So that's quite, dangerous if we wanna make a strong word here. So that's in terms of data, but in terms of copy, it's so hard to get a good copywriter and to make good copies. And for stories, it's especially right. And if we are playing on these high stakes, we really want to work with personality structures and true emotions, then every word is so critical to choosing. And therefore, for myself, I started developing this prototype on finding emotions. First for myself to write good copies so that I can really transport the emotions that I found out first to other assistants, but then I aligned it and I leveled up my prototype. But it's very important to find the right words. And I myself have not been I'm not a copywriter, but I trained a lot using the correct words, and I trained myself with this tool, like to really meet this correct feelings or traits of the company. And it's so critical. Like, from marketing, it's like we have so many bad copies out there. And
most of it is just a dumb generation of an LLM, which has not been fine-tuned at all. I want to talk about a specific use case, Lisa. Maybe you can walk us through, because right now we have talked about it in a very, very theoretical manner.
Yes.
But maybe you have one use case or multiple use cases you can talk about where a company started basically from scratch, not literally from scratch, but maybe they had no idea how to visualize a specific impact or data or a KPI, and then you have helped them transform kind of their data journey, if you want to call it like that, just to make it very concrete. Because right now, I think the listeners also want to understand, how have you done it concretely?
Yeah. So I can talk about one company that is working in the waste management system. And so they had the issue that they had a lot of calls with clients. They all were impressed by the service that they offer, but they never, not never, but hardly ever they could then sell the product in the end. And then we did a deep analysis on what they are, like what the issues are in terms of communication. And first of all, we of course analyzed where do the customers go to their first interact on LinkedIn, the website, where is the focus. And then we found out, okay, they go for ads to the homepage. And then on the homepage, we really looked at where do the specific target groups go. So you have the sustainability team, then you have the sales team, then you have the CEO that might have a look. So you have the different personalities that go on the different pages, and then we provided data for each of them to calm their mind. So the sustainability team got a lot of data about the great impact that they have on their own environmental footprint. Then the sales team got a lot of, or the finance team, sales team got a lot of data on how much time this tool saves them and how much what that time saving means for their financial outcome. And then the CEO got a lot about the reputation, but also, of course, the financial part, but in a different manner, like in a more high level. So we worked out the target group and then created the data stories for each of them. But again, always considering how the company was. And the company was a lot about collective impact and innovative, like combining technical stuff with environment, and then just this feeling of a clean place, because So we did a lot about this. So we visualized, we used like realistic objects that you associate with dirt or ugliness, and and that are really like making you feel uncomfortable. And I use these to transport the message of you can get rid of that, and then by cleaning up this stuff, you have all this space that you grow and da da da. So that was kind of the story. But that was the external representation, so the homepage. We reworked the complete homepage, so from the beginning to the end. And then that's the first part. But then for the customer communications, that was a B2B business. And there we also used individualized customer communication, where we used this data visualization for each of the customers, and again prepared some stories and automatized it. So that was then the other part. And the third part was to develop some key, I don't call it key performance indicators, but key purpose indicators that are not like that match with who the company is and where it wants to go, and are more motivational than, like this key performance indicators. Like they matched again what they really wanted to have. They wanted to have a company that has profit, of course, because then they can save more waste, and they want to have that amount of waste savings. So they we developed some data stories on that and some gamification on top. But that's only.
What was the gamification bit about? I would be interested in that.
Yeah, how much? Like each department had a bit of, like the goal was, of course, to reduce waste.
Yeah.
So who can do a better contribution to that and that? So we tracked back each contribution of each department. So one department has, the sales department, of course, gained waste once they got more sales. The other one got like the marketing team, but they had more clicks. So each one had a specific contribution, and then they could have had a little competition who gained or who saved most waste per month, and they got a little prize. So that was,
I see.
So just translating it to a more concrete step of the employee.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
What tools are you using? I mean, you use LLMs, right? But what other tools are you using to kind of translate this kind of whole theory bit of large language models, the personality profile, etc., to something that is also measurable on the website, something like heat maps or whatever you're using? Maybe you can give us some insights on tooling.
Tooling, yes. Yeah, so from the visualization side, I'm a big advocate of open source, because I always give the clients then the tools and all the code so that they can replicate it and do it themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm an open scientist at heart. And there I use R and Python. I think I use it for 90% of all my tasks and tools. And even for report writing and for automatization. Of course, I then link it back with the tools. I have to check up which tools the company uses so that we can make a smooth process. But these are the mammoth work I was doing in R and Python. Yeah.
Okay. And anything else that you use, for example, for let's say you build a website, something that you use for tracking purposes, for example. Is that something that you are
I'm
a big
always
fan
using
of?
the stuff that the company already uses. Yeah. So for now, I get this. I haven't figured out which one I want to use myself precisely, but I think it's always, I want to be as flexible on that part for the company so that it's easy for them to integrate the whole process. And I'm pretty fast in understanding the tools, so that is an advantage that I can be flexible, and then I try to always use what they're using.
Yeah. Do you have maybe 3 or 5 top common pitfalls that companies do when they want to visualize data? Maybe we can kind of have a summary from Lisa herself. Maybe let us know.
Yeah. So the first thing is having, like the obvious one, cluttered data visualizations. That's the pain in. It's really awful. Like there is you should have as little ink as is necessary to transport the maximum of information. That's very important. And people think that more is more in data communication. It's not. I also use more ink than data, but very purposefully to add the emotion. So there is more data than ink. So in my scientific world, I only use the ink that is really representing the data. But for the company communication, it's important to act the emotion, otherwise nobody will pay attention. But cluttered data is the worst. Make it feel smooth, simple, clean. That's the first thing. The second thing is using the wrong data graph for a specific task. For instance, in the data visualization world, the devil in the room is always the bar chart and the pie chart, but the pie chart especially. They don't like it. But sometimes I think it can be purposeful and it can be meaningful if you just want to show that one portion is smaller or larger than the other, but you don't want to show how much larger it is. So it can be meaningful because people understand pie charts already.
Yeah.
But if you're using it and you want to tell that there are 30% of that, the 20% of that, it's the wrong chart, because then people, they cannot compare. The eye immediately has to look into the graph and has to see, okay, this is the context. So the eye starts on the top. This is the context. And we have to go to the left, especially in the Western world. I mean, if we are working for Eastern clients, we have to flip them whole thing. And then you have to start with the character. So whom is it about? That is the next step that the person has to understand. Then what is at stake? That's then in the middle of the figure. And then what is the resolution? What is the outcome? And what is the action? It's on the right side of the figure. And so it's pretty simple, but you have to comply to these rules. So like the eye goes from top and makes a set for the figure. And that's how we look at figures and graphs. And that's also where you place the elements of your story in a data story. I mean, of course, we have now a lot of tools that can be interactive or, moving you through the whole story. But oftentimes, especially if we want to just make, of course, we can put videos on LinkedIn, but, sometimes we just need a plain figure. And then it's very important to put the stuff at the right place so that people walk through the story. So there I also see a lot of error. The third one is that people don't add context. That's so important. Like if people don't get where this data comes from, what it means, how they should think about it. So you should really think, where's the client now? And what does he understand? What is his world? And how can I pull him to my world? So that's the first context piece that has always to be there. And hardly ever I see context, which makes that data story.
Let me be very. Yeah, makes sense, Lisa. I want to understand the context bit a little bit more, because for me it's still too abstract. Does it mean like you walk them through a journey, like the transformation of the prospect to becoming a customer? So basically, you can achieve the same if you work with us, or does it mean something different?
It means something different. It means that like, what is the thing about? For instance, let me bring up an example. Yesterday I made a figure about this circular economy thing, but then it was a lot about where is this company in the industry, and which industries is ahead, and we looked at the information of it. So I started off with something like, who will be ahead by 2060 in terms of circular economy? So what is the question? What is the thing that we should ask with this thing? So it's very simple. Like, it's just giving them the question in their head, because they don't come with the question. Maybe they have their own question, but you have to put what you are asking to see in the figure. The action and what you are saying is coming later with the resolution. So then you have there we just had a bar chart, not a bar chart, but a ball plot where we showed the industries, and then you had a possibility to look at it and get the information yourself, so that you can level up to this level where the guys are that you want to be, where you want to be at. So there has to be an action step into it. So that's another thing that I often don't see, a call to action. We all know that in marketing, we need a call to action. And the data story without a call to action is not useful for marketing. You can use it in science, but not in marketing.
Yeah. How do you tap into the emotion of the potential buyer? Because there is a differentiation between selling a supplement versus selling a vitamin, or like actually a painkiller. Not a supplement and vitamin is probably the same thing because it's kind of a nice to have, but a painkiller is the actual painkiller. I should have said it that way. So two different ways. So vitamin / supplement and the painkiller. So how do you make sure you're actually selling the painkiller, not the vitamin or supplement?
That's a very good question. Yeah. And you connected already with the emotion. So I think that's the key, right? I think you have to make the stakes very high. I always try to focus on, when I visualize it, you have one focal point in the visual, where the customer immediately looks at. Either you highlight it with a color, or and the rest is in gray shades or whatever. But you have to have the strongest visual in the high stakes area. So where you see,
meaning, this is interesting. Let me just interrupt for a second. This is super interesting. That means basically you don't focus on what they can gain, but what they can lose, because they're more afraid of what they could potentially lose. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Nice. That's interesting.
It's it's psychology, right? It works better. Yeah. I mean, we also provide, and that's the cool thing about the data story, that you focus on the pain in terms of the visual, but then comes the resolution. So for instance, for this waste issue I had, or for the community, like we had the first part of the figure were these ugly elements that nobody wanted to have in their company, right? Like these things that everybody wanted to get rid of. And also the announcement that when you have this in your company and you don't take care of it, that's the amount of money that you lose. So it's like this, help. And then, but we have a solution with our company. We can provide you this and that, and then after that, it can look like this. And then you can, like it is before and after is always strong, right? And but that attached with data, of course, because you have numbers that can show it afterwards. The situation can look like this. And
okay, but from my perception, I feel like a lot of companies are going down that route already. So my question is, Lisa, like looking into the future, like maybe 5-10 years ahead, everybody is doing now the data thing. They have kind of understood. Marketers have become more aware, and salespeople have become more aware how important data visualization will be. Maybe they've worked with you, so everybody at some point is on the same level. I asked it previously. So how then you can stand out in 5 or 10 years? Like what's the next thing?
What's the next thing? That's a very good question. I think my core vision of why I do what I do now, working with companies, is to really reveal their core. I think we are quite far away from that. Like, I did a lot of analysis and work with the Gen Z, and they are like, we now 30% of the workforce moves out right now, and there is a huge gap to be filled. And the Gen Z and Gen Alpha will fill this. And these generations really only go to companies that match their values, that match like the purpose that they are on. So they have a it's a high value generation, but it's super important for the companies. And I think we are far away from having a company structure where we really immediately know what the company is about. Like, what do we really get apart from the product? What do they stand for? And I think if we can match the two of them, that would be cool. And yeah, that would be awesome. And then I think, of course, in terms of employees, I would love to see, if it's so clear that everybody transports who they are and what they stand for, and that we can match this hopefully with the new generations and who they are, and that would be utopian, but it's my inner wishes. So we can get
it sounds like a utopia, because sometimes the positioning and messaging exercise itself is already like a big task, because companies are very biased. They think about themselves way much different than if you come in as a consultant and you see the company the first time. You do this, and this, and they're going to be like, no, we do something completely different.
It's really hard to, and that's a very good point that you're saying. How I work with companies is I only work with one company at a time. Mm-hmm. There's a term that's called immersion, and I'm a big fan of it. So I think I struggled working with several companies because I couldn't get to who they really are, because you come from the outside in, and so it is so difficult to really understand what is going on. And that, at least for me, it's helpful to work only with them in a sprint very intensely. And then I hope to get a bit closer than others do. But it's hard to do something from extra. So I also had experience at McKinsey and stuff, and that was a bit different, where you had a lot of you had a lot of systems, great systems, but you can't apply systems if you don't understand what's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I think we went way over time, by the way.
Did we? Sorry.
No, a little bit, just a little bit, because usually we do the podcast for like 30 minutes, which is completely fine. I'm just interested. I would be interested in probably the audience as well. Like, where can we get more information about you, your service, but then also research? Maybe if you can share some insights. How do you keep yourself up to date, Lisa, on a daily basis?
I myself, I just go to conferences and myself, I read a lot about this stuff, and in my work I learn a lot myself. But you can get, either meet me on LinkedIn, or my homepage is Lisa Wierer, so Wierer, WIERER.com, and there is all about I call myself the conscious data scientist, all about the company there, and there are my university research stuff, which you can find on my university homepage, but that's on LLMs and stuff, and maybe not on the market audience.
Yeah, but maybe if people are more technically, they want to learn more about the technicalities like myself, then I probably would have a look at it. But I translate, so I also see myself a lot translating, what we found and what has been proven to work to actual business contexts. So. It's interesting. I think you should also have maybe an own YouTube channel and talk about the stuff in a bit more detail and walk through case studies.
I would love to. Yeah, I'm thinking
that would be interesting.
I'm also I'm founding a community right now. It's called the Purpose Circle for Biz Leaders, where I give an in-depth course on that. And I have the launch event on the 17th of December, and there is like the founding members or the first members get it for a very, very low price, and then we will increase. But if people are interested to learn more about it, to learn the how-tos and stuff, then I have a group there where we work on that, and there are really cool people there already that, some innovators themselves, some startups, some different people, and some psychologists, and so this cool. is a cool group, I think, where we can evolve.
Make sure to send me the link, Lisa, after the podcast. I want to check that.
I will. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Nice.
Lisa, thank you so much.
Talking to you, Joseph. So good questions.
Likewise, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe there will be a second part in the future. Then if you have any other topics or case studies to share with us, then we can have certainly a second part.
We haven't talked about, it has been quite abstract. I would love to show the personality calculator, however I call it, because I think that would be more fun. I have to work on the visuals still to make it approachable. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe next time then, Lisa.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.